could find such a love at our age. Whoever thought we could dance on a...
Welcome to a special edition of Couples Therapy in 7 Words. I'm your co-host, Judy Alexander, and I'm here with my husband, Dr. Bruce Chalmer.
Well, hello, Judy. Hello, viewers and listeners. Yeah, we're really excited about this one, I have to say. We just got back from an amazing... You know what? We're going to do another episode of this, just talking about what we just experienced. We just came back from a cruise on the Main and Rhine rivers, visiting basically Jewish sites in Germany, or former Jewish sites in Germany, or Jewish history in Germany. Anyway,
Jewish heritage
tour.
Is the best way to put it.
And it was really fascinating, and it was wonderful, and we gained an awful lot of weight because the food was fabulous. But it was also disturbing. And, you know, in terms of what I've written about in terms of betrayal and forgiveness, I had some experiences there that really just brought home to me the complexity of all of that. Yeah. So we're going to do another whole episode on that. But that's not this episode.
No, that's not this episode.
Because, tell people why we're so excited.
Well, this episode is called Food, Family, and Memories, an interview with the doyenne of Jewish cooking, Joan Nathan.
And we were so honored, and it was such a delight. On this tour, Joan Nathan was there, and she actually had designed the menu for the Shabbat dinner that we had, and she also, everybody on the tour had a chance to have a smaller, a smaller group dinner.
An intimate bistro dinner.
Yes.
With recipes prepared from her cookbook.
And
I don't want to say prepared by her because we did have a chef on board,
but
he was using all of her recipes, and amazing.
It was absolutely amazing.
Absolutely amazing.
And we just so happened to get to know Joan on the trip. We were kind of by chance seated with her like the first day at lunch.
That's right, at the first lunch.
And we were, shooting the breeze, and she had been widowed not that long ago.
Right, 5 years ago.
5 years ago,
5, 6
and
years.
was there with someone with whom she's having a new kind of sort of relationship. I don't think they defined it thoroughly yet. But anyway, we just got to talking, and of course I said, hey, can we interview you for our podcast?
And there you have it.
And there we have it. So we did that. So that's the treat you have in store for you, is our interview with Joan Nathan. So before we get on with our interview, which you'll see was taken aboard ship, Judy, tell us about our guest, Joan Nathan.
Joan Nathan is a beloved culinary icon, author, and spirited storyteller, often recognized as the leading authority on Jewish cuisine. With 12 acclaimed books, including Jewish Cooking in America and King Solomon's Table, Joan blends history, heritage, and heart in every recipe. A frequent contributor to the New York Times, the Washington Post, and PBS, Joan's warmth and wisdom have earned her multiple James Beard Awards and a place in the who's who of food and beverage in America. She has worked alongside culinary legends like Julia Child, Ruth Reichel, and Alice Waters. And we are pleased to welcome today Joan Nathan.
So we'll see you on the other side of the interview.
Joan, welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words.
Thank you.
We are delighted to have you. This is, as our regular viewers know, this is a very unusual way for us to do it. We are actually on board a ship on the Main River in Germany, and Joan is here. Oh, I need to
lower your camera.
Yes, folks who are watching this is not exactly a professional production video-wise.
Yes, we're not in our studio.
We're not in our usual studio. We always like to start off by asking our guests, how did you get into the work you do? Tell us something about that. And I also will note, by the way, you have a memoir coming out, which everybody who's seeing this should read. But tell us about that as well.
Okay, well, first of all, I always like to eat, so that's one way. And then I was living in Jerusalem when I was in my 20s, working for the mayor of Jerusalem, Teddy Kollek, and I noticed that he loved to eat, and that a way of getting into communities, into bonding with people, is breaking bread. And I felt that my whole life, even in these times, that when you sit down with people and you talk about what is similar in your lives rather than what is dissimilar, it just break down so many barriers. So that's the first one. And then my memoir it came out a few months ago. It's about my life in recipes. And my editor wanted to do a hybrid cookbook on not just recipes, but how recipes become part of who you are. And that's what my book is. It's got 100 recipes, and it's the story of my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us some of the recipes that you used and how they intertwine with your life?
Well, I'll tell you one actually about Israel. And this was in 1970 when it was a different Israel then. And there were, the mayor of Jerusalem, Teddy Kollek, wanted me to go with him to visit an Arab village. They wanted a paved road. Don't forget, this was 3 years after the Six-Day War. Mm-hmm. And their neighboring village had a paved road. They'd never had one before. And Teddy realized that to get one in their village would have been twice the amount of driving, so it meant twice as expensive a road. And he said, we can't do it, but he wanted to go and talk to the villagers. So he asked if I wanted to come, and I said, sure. So I went with several men from the municipality. I was the only woman there. And we drove to this village, which I forget the name of it. And of course, the people that were with me are dead, so it was one thing I could never find out. Anyway, so we went there, and the Mukhtar, the leader of the village, had us sit down, which we did, and he gave us Turkish coffee, which of course we wanted to have. And then they asked their request that they really would like to have a road, and Teddy Kollek said, I just can't do it. It's just too much. We don't have the money for that much of a road. And then they brought out all these meza, the different salads, and kuba, all these delicious hummus and baba ganoush and everything. And we ate that and drank arak. And everybody was getting to feel very good. And they asked again about the road, and he said, I just can't do it. So then this dish came out called musakhan, and it was chicken on a huge pita with sumac and sauteed delicious onions and pine nuts. One of the best dishes I've ever had in my life. And we all ate it with the right hand, and afterwards we had Turkish coffee, and it was I got a great recipe. They got their road, and
somehow that changed Teddy's
and I got a career because I realized the role of food in people's lives.
Yeah.
And
what a great story.
It's a great story, and the recipe for musakhan is still my favorite recipe, and it's in the book.
Oh, nice.
The book is called My Life in Recipes.
And it's not too difficult, your recipe. I will say this, the thing I like about your recipes, your cookbooks, is that it's not difficult. I mean, I love Yotam Adolangi, but I have a few of his cookbooks, and they are so involved that I get very frustrated doing it. So I'm not to badmouth him because he's got great stuff.
Wonderful.
But I'm more simplicity, and I get that great flavor and taste, I think, with your recipes, which are a lot easier to make.
Well, the thing is that he's got millions of people who can make all those sauces. It's a restaurant.
Yeah.
So he can just take a sauce and put it on whatever, but you have to make the sauce.
Yeah.
So that's why.
And they've got 40 ingredients,
Right.
and some of which I can't get in Vermont, so we don't have the little Middle Eastern market on the corner the way he has in London. And we've actually eaten at his London restaurant, which is fabulous. But but I like the simplicity of your recipes. So tell us also about your life. I know you said your husband died about 6 years ago, five and a half years ago. So how has that been for you?
Well,
I mean,
he
I'm not
died,
good, but
we were married 45 years, and he's all of a sudden started acting very peculiarly, and then he went to the hospital and we couldn't figure out what it was. It was something called spontaneous Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. And so it hits people when they're in their late 60s. He was, or early 70s. He was 74. And it's not, what he had was not mad cow disease, but it was like mad cow disease.
Oh my.
And the prions start to fall. Well, I had no idea what was going on. All I know is that his balance was off and that his brain was off. And he said, when I figure out one thing, there's something else. And that's because it's as if you had Alzheimer's and Parkinson's in one body. So he would lose, but he was sort of forgetful about a lot of things, and he didn't have great balance to begin with. And I noticed in the water in the summer that he just couldn't, he had no balance. But I never figured it out until we put him into the hospital and did some tests about a month later. And then they said, well, it'll be a year, and it was 3 months. It was very quick.
Oh.
So anyway, so it's really, I was just reading a Geraldine Brooks book, memoir, about her husband who died 10 months before Alan, and actually, just before Alan died, I was at Tony's memorial service, and Alan didn't want to go because he didn't really know Tony, even though he really did. But he wanted to drive around, and he couldn't remember where I was. But again, he was forgetful. So anyway, it was hard. It was very hard. The shock of it was hard. It's hard. It's just really hard when somebody dies.
And how has it affected your work?
Well, I was writing my book at the time, and it took a while, and then COVID came. And I at first, I was really stunned. I just didn't, you just don't know how to cope. But you do, it's like, you have to. And I have 3 kids, and for all of us it was very difficult. But then I knew I had to write this book, and I decided after reading Joan Didion's memoir after her husband died that I didn't want to do something like that, because what she did was, I was very helpful. I realized the repetition of death. The death creates repetition. You tell the same stories over and over again, and you go over those stories in your head. Why? What could have been done? All kinds of things. And I realized that since I was writing my memoir, I didn't want, and I had 3 kids, I wanted to, this would be a great time for me to think about him and to put him within my life rather than outside my life. And we had a good life together. We did, there were a lot of laughs. Of course, it was ups. Every marriage has ups and downs, right? The 2 of you, I think. Anyway.
We're waiting for the downs. We've only been married for 21 years.
So still pretty good up.
But when it's right, it's right.
Yes.
And it turns on personalities, too.
That's true.
He was, very strong. Anyway, and so I used it as a time. I would get up very early in the morning, and I would write in bed, and I would incorporate him into my memoir. And that was really fun because I could find out more about his life and all kinds of other things as you're checking to make sure that you're writing the right thing. And I think it helped me actually through this period, because I did that for a year. And then in the afternoon I would check my facts, and and my kids were amazing, all of them, and they encouraged me to be part of their lives, which I was. And luckily I have a lot of friends, and I'm busy.
Yeah.
So, but it was, and I never thought I would ever want to get involved with anybody. Everybody that I met I just wasn't interested until I met Mike. That's all.
So you're dating somebody now?
I'm dating somebody now.
And what is it like?
Just by way of explaining the context here, because we're on this cruise on the Main, soon to be the Rhine River, and we have met Mike.
Yeah.
Who's a lovely guy, and I guess you've been together what, about a year?
Well, we've met. It's been a long distance relationship, and it probably will continue. It just makes it easier. But I don't think I could have. I think 5 years is a good amount of time to get yourself involved with somebody else. I don't think I felt, in retrospect, now that I'm reading Geraldine Brooks' memoir, it took me 5 years to feel myself again. And it took her, she's still grieving. I mean, if you read her memoir.
Yeah, I haven't read her memoir. I've read her novels.
I've read everything of hers.
Oh, okay. I haven't.
But she lives on Martha's Vineyard, so we've talked about.
Yeah.
In fact, she helped me after Alan first passed away, and it might have been the first year. I was invited before then to go to Australia to speak to the Jewish community of Australia, of Melbourne. And I went on my own, and I could never have done it unless people had organized things for me so that I wasn't alone. And then I couldn't do it for more than, I think, 2 weeks. That was the most I could do, and then I would come. You do things in steps. And even then, when I went to Australia, and she told me what to do, Geraldine and I, because we took a long walk together before.
What to do in terms of like how to get through the grief?
Yeah, no, just what to do because we both were grieving, and she just, but you had to keep going. You couldn't not go.
But it's great that you had somebody to go through it with, so to speak.
Oh yeah, she was very, very helpful because it provided going. I mean, I was able to stay with Jewish families in both Sydney and Melbourne.
And was that people that she put you in touch with, or
somebody that I know in Melbourne? But this was a year after he died. But then things just, or maybe it was 2 years. I can't remember. But I did things step by step, and I remember once somebody invited me to go to the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and I thought, I don't want to go there. I just didn't. And it's a good friend of mine, what she said to me was, what are you going to stay home and, be, what else do you have to do? Yeah. So I went, and I really had a good time, but you have to push yourself. And
Sure.
My mother taught me something that was very, very helpful. She said, nobody is going to reach out to you. It's really up to you to reach out to people. And I remember going to that dinner, and it was just after COVID, and I saw this woman in fabulous jewelry, Native American jewelry. So I went up to her, and she was looking at me, and I was looking at her, and I think NPR's Robert Siegel was in between the two of us, laughing because he knew who she was. I had no idea who she was. So I went up to her, and I thought, this is what my mother would have done, and I reached out my hand, and I said, my name is Joan Nathan, I'm admiring your jewelry. And she said, my name is Deb Holland, I'm the Secretary of Interior.
Oh, wow.
And I'm admiring your shawl. And we've become great friends.
Isn't that nice?
And I don't think that was the friend that my friend was suggesting, that maybe I would meet a man.
Right.
I wasn't even thinking.
Yeah.
I have a good life.
Yeah.
And anyway.
I read your daughter's article that she had in the Modern Love column.
Oh, you did?
That was a lovely, lovely article. I don't think I had a chance to even tell you about it yet.
She's a good
Yeah, Marissa, a wonderful writer. And she wrote about, I guess she had knee surgery or some type of leg surgery, and right around COVID. And you went down to stay with her before COVID locked everything down, intending to stay for 5 days. And it turned out to be like 2 months.
And she didn't think she could survive it, but she did.
Yeah, not only did she survive, but I love how, I'm going to cry. She said, I fell in love with my mother. That was so touching.
Well, it was really fun.
Yeah.
Because I used to go into stores when my kids all said to me, you cannot go into a store. But there was a Middle Eastern store right near where she lived in New Orleans, and I wanted to make hummus, I wanted to make other things. So I would go in there with a mask on, and I would buy all these ingredients. I just would never tell her. I also went to Baskin Robbins to have ice cream almost every day, just
So now I have to ask you a question, hummus. Canned chickpeas, or do you soak them?
soak them, definitely. Don't you?
No, I use canned. I should soak them? I can never soak them enough.
I will say your hummus is very good.
It is very good.
I'm sure it's good. But the thing that makes my hummus, I think, special is I take preserved lemons and I throw it in.
I just use lemon zest and lemon juice. But preserved lemons.
Do you make preserved lemons?
No.
We should do it.
Okay.
Because then you have them all the time, and they just make. There's a recipe in my memoir for it.
Okay. I will have to make that one now. Okay.
I can see she's a good cook.
Oh, yeah, she's a very good cook. Yes, I'm spoiled in so many ways. Indeed. So I'm curious, and this is a very broad question, I think, but you've talked about dealing with your husband's death, and you've also talked about having had a good marriage for 45 years, and it's the hackneyed question is, gee, how did you do that? But I want to ask a little more specifically, how did your work that you do, your work with food and with people around food and all that, how did that
And
sort of
travel,
fit into your
too.
marriage? And travel, all of that. How did that fit in?
Easily, I can tell you. First of all, my husband, I think one of the things, we both let each other be who we were. And, I think he wanted me to be traditional in a certain way, but he also let me be who I was. And what I would do is, in retrospect, I probably worked too much. But I worked at home so that when my kids came home from school or whatever, I was right there and I could. But I would test recipes during the week, and then Friday nights we would always have a family dinner, and then we'd also invite people. Not like a dinner party. That's what I love about Friday night. It's like who would call me during the week, or and then of course. For Passover, a lot of people would call that didn't have a place to go. So we would have like 40 people for Passover, and he was a traditionalist. He had come from a family from Zamość, Poland, that were they weren't in the Holocaust. They were saved by deportation. Is that what it's called? They went to the Soviet Union, and then they were in Uzbekistan, Samarkand. That's where my husband was born.
Oh, wow.
But all of their family was killed, both sides. So they, the Holocaust was so much part of our lives, but also tradition was part of our lives. And so we were able, I would stockpile the recipes or the dishes for Friday night, and it worked for us. I would have these dinners, and during the week I would make pastas and things like that for the kids. And we'd have always a dinner together at night. That was something that was important to both of us.
And what did he do?
He was an international lawyer. He was public international law. He was a anti-terrorist lawyer. So he was the one who suggested that they sue Libya over Pan Am 103.
Oh, wow, yeah. I remember.
So
Yeah.
I mean, you can read about him in all of his obituaries. So we really, we had a very interesting life. It was, and our kids were always so much part of it. And it was funny, and it was fun.
How'd you meet him in the first place?
I was living in Jerusalem and working for Teddy Kollek, and he was working for the Ministry of Justice. And there was a, what do you call it? We were both down at the Western Wall where remember the Leningrad trials where there were these scientists that were trying to get out of the Soviet Union, they couldn't get out.
Yeah.
Well, my friend, she was a Romanov, and her father was Jewish, and she was working with this group, and she asked me if since I worked for the mayor of Jerusalem, would I help her? So I went down there to help her, and my husband was supposed to seduce a woman who they thought was a KGB agent, and the rest is history.
Boy, that's a
Did
story.
he think you were the agent, or?
So he kind of had his seduction charm turned on,
exactly.
and it worked.
So it didn't work out for the KGB, but it worked out for you. The femme fatale. It's a whole new side. Mild-mannered cook by day, femme fatale by night.
Absolutely. So, you already, I'm going to ask you a question, but you already gave a really good answer to it, but I'm going to ask it anyway, and perhaps give the same answer. How do you build a strong marriage? And what you already said was, you let each other be yourselves, just he let you be you and you let him be him.
Right, but I think that what you said about, I don't know if you said to listen, but I think, in retrospect, there are things I would have done more.
Uh-huh.
I would have been more accessible to him, to listening, and just to let, I think that I would tell my kids that, just to sort of forget your busyness. I think that would have been a smart idea on my part. So,
yeah, it's always hard to sort that out until after the fact.
Is that
I think
true?
in some ways. I think so. I mean, you are, internationally known. Would you have been that if you hadn't worked so hard? I don't know. There's no knowing, but probably not.
well, I was
Maybe
also
not.
pretty lucky too.
Well, there's always that, I think, right?
I would say it was like a moment when Jewish food was sort of people were not just Jewish food, but ethnic food was in the 70s. My first book came out in 75, The Flavor of Jerusalem, and there was nothing like it. There were no head notes and recipes. They said my book was the first one, and it just struck a chord with people. And I sold 25,000 copies right away.
Yeah.
And it's much more difficult now because of the internet, because of the Instagram, with everybody trying to be an Instagram star.
Oh, yeah.
And plus, there's just so many more people right now.
And everyone's writing a cookbook.
Yeah, well, and the barrier to entry, and we're both authors, we know. I mean, we're sort of beneficiaries of this fact. The barrier to entry is very low. You don't need to find a publisher the way you used to.
Right. Exactly.
And it's harder to find a publisher
It's
now
harder to find a
because the
publisher.
market is so saturated.
Well, and also because publishers are not making that much money on books. I mean,
Right.
for
Yeah.
gifts they are.
That's true.
But when I was in, we're in Germany right now, and I was in Munich in a bookstore, and actually a cousin of mine took me to a cooking store, but there were tons of different cookbooks, and I saw all these American names, but not names that were necessarily known in America.
Oh, really?
That were on them. Yeah,
Interesting. Was yours there?
I didn't see that. And the funny thing is that Bertelsmann, which owns
Yeah.
Knopf and Random House. So
Right. What's your favorite cookbook of your cookbooks, if you have one?
I love all of them.
Pick your favorite child.
Yes, exactly. I think of, I feel as if working on a book is like doing a PhD thesis, that you really learn so much from writing the book. I mean, I remember after I wrote The Flavor of Jerusalem, I met with a Vermonter, Judith Jones, and she wanted me to write an American cookbook. And I thought, I don't want to do that. I did one later with her, but I said, I really want to write a book on Jewish food. And she said, well, I'm doing one with Claudia Rodin, the book of, which became maybe 10 years later the Book of Jewish Food, because she got caught up in other things in her life. So it's not fair to her to have you write one on Jewish food, write one on American food. And I said, no, I'm going to write one on Jewish food. That's what I did. I was young, and I had no idea that Judith Jones was Julia Child's editor, and she was, she was the one who discovered the Diary of Anne Frank. And
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, all of my Jewish friends know who you are. Not all my non-Jewish friends know who you are, so I have to tell them the Julia Child of Jewish cooking, which I don't like referring to you that way because you're your own person. So I try to say the doyenne of Jewish cooking, but
I know that the edible, what do you call it? The edible, that magazine, Vermont magazine, edible.
I don't know.
Edible Eats? No.
No, last year they did a really nice article on me in Vermont.
You're not talking about 7 days. I think
I forget the person's name. Edible, maybe Vermont. Every place has one.
Yeah, we probably do, but I probably don't know about it. But
anyway.
So in writing this latest cookbook memoir, what is there something that you found out about either yourself or remembered about your husband, or something about your life together that surprised you?
Well, in working on the memoir, one of the things I realized is how the Holocaust really affected him, and that I knew it from the beginning of my marriage. I knew, but I didn't understand it until I wrote my book. For example, the secrets that were in his family affected him much more than I ever realized, and they didn't affect his younger brother because he was that much younger.
Wow.
And he's a psychologist, so he's gone through. But it was secrecy. His parents, he learned that he was. When he thought he was 13 years old and just about to be bar mitzvah, they told him two things. Number one, that he was 11 and a half, and number two, that his name was not Abe Rubenstein, it was Alan Gerson. And
he thought his name was different until he was...
because they came as illegal immigrants from World War II. And I realized that and combined with the Holocaust, where my parents took care of us. Even though my father was German, he came in 1929, and he wasn't poor, he wasn't, but my parents always took care of us. Mm-hmm. And my husband and his brother took care of his parents. So they were surrounded, as we've learned from other people here, with just Holocaust survival people, so that he felt guilty about his parents, but angry with his parents. Mm-hmm. And so, and I remember when I first got married, I don't know, I'm telling you all this for the world to hear, I read this book, I think Children of the Holocaust, and I understood then what I really know. I mean, I knew, but it took 45 years of marriage to really know that he, in a way, he never faced it. Mm-hmm. And it was hard because I never really knew until he died what was going on. And I think it's very typical of a lot of Holocaust survivors.
Oh yeah.
And so.
That's amazing. I mean, of course, they learned to keep secrets very early, and it's so timely to hear about folks who came here as illegal immigrants, and that was the only way they could survive.
And it's this, and exactly.
Yeah.
And I purposefully ask people, let's say if they are a cleaning person or somebody that I meet that I know is illegal, and I totally understand now. Maybe it's because of the world that we're in right now that I really understand that.
Yeah.
And my heart goes out to them because, especially if you're a parent, and his parents didn't do that to be evil or to do
Of course
anything.
not.
It was for them for survival, and they were scared.
Yeah.
But the effect that it has on your children is pretty awful.
Yeah.
And that's what I learned. Maybe I learned, when I was writing the book, I learned that.
What was it about writing the book you think that sort of crystallized that for you?
Well, I had time to really think about things and talk to his brother and my sister-in-law. They're both psychoanalysts, and they were very helpful. And just think, some things you have in your brain about whatever happens, you just accept it. And then when you learn about these things, how hard it was. And then I was able to go through his letters, and I saw letters that he wrote to his parents that I would never have written. It was like taking care of his parents. And this responsibility. And also, the other thing was, he had an older brother that died of diphtheria during the war. So it was an angel. I was thinking about it, that there are a lot of very well-known three brothers today, like the Emmanuel brothers.
I was just thinking.
And then, what's his name with an N? But there are several brothers that I know. I have a friend, there are four brothers, whose one brother was governor of Minnesota, a lot of them immigrant children. And I was thinking, if there were two brothers in my husband's family, there had been three, then there's this competition, but also so much fun. Right?
I'm one of the three brothers myself, actually.
So you know.
And my father was too, and I have three boys.
So you know about
Yes,
that.
he does.
I only have one boy and two girls, but I was thinking the whole thing would have been different if his brother had lived.
Yeah.
But then, because his brother died, he had to live up to his brother. He had to, because you can't compete with an angel.
Right. Right.
So, he had, and I knew that he had never come to terms with any of these things, but I only really learned about it truly when I was working on the book.
Wow.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. This has been a treat for
Should I
us.
have said that?
Yeah.
You can say whatever you like. We're really grateful.
But
Thanks.
It was very honest. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, he can't answer, but So in a way, what's from you still have it on.
We're still going, but I can stop.
But
it.
it's
Tell you what, we'll wrap it up, and then you can say what
we
you
can say. I mean,
Well, we're still rolling, so go ahead.
well, and then I'm going out with certain. I mean, I haven't been that interested in going out, but going out with an American-born person is so much easier.
Is that right?
No question.
He hasn't been through that. All that
He hasn't
stuff.
been through that.
Doesn't carry such weight.
It really does.
Yeah.
And guilt.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because he really didn't want to be around his parents. Just don't let my kids hear this.
Well, don't tell them about it. Yes. Why don't we'll stop the recording now?
Well, that's a lot to chew over. Pun intended. Couldn't help myself. But as we said, Joan was just delightful. I have several of her cookbooks, and one of the things, I told Joan this, one of the things that I like about her recipes is that they are not fussy. They are good, and you don't have to be an expert chef to make it. Like I have some other cookbooks, and they take a lot of prep, but Joan's, they're pretty straightforward, and they are delicious. And she had so many nice things to say about what an amazing life she's had.
Yeah, really, really something. So we hope you enjoyed that. By the way, buy our books. In fact, we were talking actually to Joan and actually quite a few other folks on this tour. It was a Jewish organized tour, so lots of folks expressed a great deal of interest in Laria Zilber's book.
Yes, Laria Zilber's
The Blue
book.
Tent.
The Blue Tent. Dare
which,
I show it?
Oh, well,
Dare
of course
I
you
show it?
Of
Yes,
course
I
you
do.
dare show it.
Of course I do. Yes, The Blue Tent, Erotic Tales from the Bible.
So get a hold of that, and also all of my books as well. And until next time,
Remember, be kind
don't panic.
and have faith.